And everybody, welcome to the long-awaited Benchmade hard use test remodel giveaway video. It's probably going to be split up into a series of videos right here at the outset. I'm not exactly sure if I'm going to make one long video or split it up into a couple, but here's why we're here today. We're taking the Benchmade Model 275, the Benchmade Model 810, we're putting them through their paces, we're treating them like crap, we're abusing them, and we're going to see how they hold up and how they do. Why are we putting these knives through this? Well, you know, when something is advertised as a hard-use military-class knife, as these are, I'm always a little bit skeptical. Now, the Benchmade name gives me a lot of faith, makes me really believe in them from the outset, but I'm the kind of person where I want to see, I want to do it, I want to experience it. I just don't want to take somebody's word for it. So with that in mind, and the way that these two are advertised and have been built up by Benchmade to be those new black class super rugged knives, I want to go for it. I want to see what we can do and how they hold up. I've got a lot of first-hand knowledge carrying the 810 Contego around. I carried this through almost my entire last deployment. You know, and I haven't used it for any like hard survival situations, but I used it as a daily EDC. It's a little bit big for an EDC, a little bit heavy, but in the military tactical environment, it held up pretty well. I've used the 275 just a little bit. This one hasn't gotten a whole lot of use. It's got some pocket wear mainly, but you know, there's a lot of people that are totally in love with this knife. I'm more of an 810 fan myself. The shape, the blade style, the weight, the materials, but that's all something we'll talk about later. I also have in front of me the good old, I don't know how long it's been in service, but decades and decades, Army Air Force standard issue survival knife. I have this out here because when you think of a hard use knife, really you're talking about a survival knife situation, sort of, in my head anyway, that's what I think. And so this is what every single pilot in the Army, in the Air Force, what tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of ground troops have been issued to use in the field in a survival situation. So I'm going to set this as kind of the benchmark. This is what we're comparing everything to. Let's start with the specs on these three. Starting with the Army Air Force survival knife. This is made by the Camillus companies. They've been made by the Ontario Knife Company, Camillus. K-Bar has made some of these, and I don't know about anything else, but those are just the names I've seen on them. But, you know, they're all the same design, and it's a good design, which is why it's lasted so long. The blade on this is made out of 1095 carbon steel, so none of these three knives we're looking at have stainless steel blades. They're all carbon steel. Advantages, disadvantages, again, as the test goes on, we'll talk about that. You've got a 5-inch blade with just under, I'd say, about 4 3/4 inch cutting surface, 9.5 inches overall, 9.2 ounces. You've got your serrations that can be used to saw a little bit right there on the spine of the knife. And then you've got your steel pommel in the back. So very all good purpose, you know, rugged kind of survival knife. And it's a fixed blade knife with a full length tang. You can see it kind of come to the end over there. So this is a really good knife that is probably going to last you as long as you need it. And it is intended so that when Army and Air Force personnel find themselves on the ground, pilots shot down in a survival type situation, whatever, this is the tool they're going to have with them. So everything that we put these two knives through, we're going to put this one through as well, just to give a good comparison. Looking at the 275, the blade is made of D2 tool steel, which is a very rugged, hard-use steel. Again, carbon, not stainless. 3.82 inch blade, 8.7 inches overall length, and 7.7 ounces. And then finally, looking at the 810, 3.98 inch blade, 9.28 inches overall length, and then 5.92 ounces. And this blade is made of CPM M4 steel. So once again, a very rugged carbon steel. None of these are stainless. Why don't we want stainless steels on a hard use knife? Because in general, a stainless steel is going to be a little bit softer than a carbon steel. Carbon steel will rust, it will corrode if not properly cared for, but it's going to last you a lot longer in that field type environment. In my opinion, in a lot of people's opinion, I mean, I'm not the end-all be-all expert on knives, but I'd rather have a carbon steel blade out there than a stainless steel blade. These aren't the only military knives available, obviously. Everybody kind of makes them. Here's a CRKT, Benchmade Griptilian. One of the most popular knives in the world, high-end knife anyway. Yeah, I'll call it high-end just because it's Benchmade, even though the Griptilian, whatever, we won't get into it. But this isn't what I'd want in a survival situation. It's a little bit too small, a little bit too light, and I don't think it will serve the purposes very well. Emerson CQC7. Now, Emerson calls themselves the best hard-use knife in the world. But I think of the Emerson more as a combat knife, actually, than anything else. You'll notice that none of these are Tonto blades. You know, and that's, you know, if you're going to be piercing armor or punching through aluminum, Tonto's great. But in just a general situation where you're going to be cutting and surviving, the nice long curved edge just suits you better. So while I love the Emerson CQC7, and it's the only Emerson I have, there are some other models I'd really like to get my hands on. Still, great military knife, good EDC knife, great combat knife, not a very good survival knife. And then just to round it off, something like something else the military issues often, the Benchmade 910 Nitro Striker. Now you can see I have carried this one a lot through several deployments. I love this knife. I absolutely love it. And I carry this one around as often as I carry this one around, just, you know, as a good EDC knife. But again, even though this is D2 carbon steel, just like the 275, the blade style, the shape, the weight, the grip on it, it's not a great survival knife. I wouldn't really want a survival knife with a folding blade in general, because this pivot point is just a place of failure, you know, for most knives. It's something that you have to keep clean. It's something that can get jammed up. It's something that can fail you. It can rust shut. It can rust open. So that's why I think most survival knives come in a fixed blade model. It's better for that environment. But Benchmade, thinking ahead on that, these access locks in these two knives are the biggest, beefiest, toughest access locks that Benchmade has ever put on a knife. I don't think you can tell that much, but if you look at the two of these, it's kind of hard to tell on camera. This is significantly thicker than this axis right here, the standard axis they put on everything else. We're going to go step by step through the test, and then once it's all done, we'll talk about evaluating it. All these knives have been sharpened by me. They're very sharp. I'm not going to go through a whole bunch of tests right now, but they would pass the paper test just fine. They would be, I wouldn't say razor sharp, but they are sharp enough to cut anything you need to cut right now. So with that being said, we're going to get to the first test. I've got 5 or 6 events planned, and if anything else pops into my head as we're going, then, you know, we'll do that too. So let's get started, and I'll see you guys in a few. So I'm starting this off just actually right here in my own backyard. I don't know if I've ever put this out on a video before, but I'm stationed in southwestern Idaho. And believe it or not, the kind of the topography, the general terrain around here really does look just like if you were right outside of Kandahar in Afghanistan. It's very, very similar climate, very similar plant life and everything. So it's actually a good place to run this test. So the first thing we're going to do, you know, first thing in my head is I get deployed out to the field somewhere. We're setting up a site for the very first time. What do we need to do? We need to set up our encampment. We need to dig holes. We need to dig holes to ground electrical equipment. We need to dig holes to set up defensive fighting positions, you know, for any number of things. And if you don't have an E-tool or a shovel or something, what are you going to do? You're going to use your field knife. So the first thing we're going to do to test is I'm just going to kind of stab into this ground repeatedly. Now, the ground here is kind of a mix of nice green stuff and some sagebrush and some weeds and some just dead, you know, grass and stuff. Dry ground, wet ground. So it's actually a pretty good, you know, all-encompassing area. So I'm just going to give each knife about 50 good stabs into the ground. We're going to see how it comes out after that, and I'm especially curious with Benchmade to see if dirt and everything jams up those axis locks. So let's get started. And 48, 49, and 50. So, finishing up with the Army Air Force survival knife. Well, we took off a significant amount of the coating over there, you can see. The ground here is actually kind of a dry, hard, packed dirt. I don't think I hit any rocks or anything, but there's all sorts of roots and stuff like that in here, just so you know what we're dealing with. So, let's move on, starting with the Benchmade 275. 6, 7, 48, 49, and 50. And boy, that Cerakote did not hold up at all. Test number 1, and you've almost got just a plain old steel knife. And actually the blade, I know you can't tell this, but it's actually pretty warm right now too, so it heated up pretty significantly going through. If you look at the blade tip, I'm pretty sure I hit a rock or something. So you can see, well, I guess it's not so much chipping, but some scratching and everything, but still, knife held up pretty well. No gunk buildup in the axis lock, so let's move on now with the 810. .46, 47, 48, 49, 50. All right, Contego, just like the other two, started to wear off that coating right away. Now again, this is just some really hard, dry earth. This isn't like stabbing into a pile of rocks or anything like that. So remember, we're talking about carbon steel blades, so this coating is a really important factor. Now it looks like the 275, and I don't know if it's the shape of the blade or the way it's made or whatever, looks like it lost the most coating out of all 3 of them, if you look. I will also say the 275 was the easiest to stab into the ground with. And again, I don't know if it's a bigger, heavier blade or just the way it's cut or whatever, but the Contego also, no problems opening and closing, still super smooth, so none of the dirt or anything flew up in there, so that's good to know. We've got test number 1 done. We're going to move on to test number 2. We're going to go ahead and chop up some wood. Then we're going to move on to getting these things wet for a little while and letting them sit to see what happens to that metal after we lose some of the coating. And don't worry, everybody, I'm going to take really good care of these things. I'm going to make sure that once the test is all done and they're remade, they are perfectly cared for and returned to like new condition before one of these guys gets given away. So don't have any worries about that. All right, quick little change in plans. I got 2 things I want to do before I get some tree branches to actually chop some wood. So I had in the garage, these are just scraps of actual hardwood that I used to make something once upon a time. And what I want to do is not cut into these. I might cut into these too, but P-cord, something else that we use all the time in the military, something that needs to be cut all the time whenever we're out in the field. So now that we've done a little bit of stabbing, we're gonna go ahead and cut some P-cord, both just, you know, a slice and then a chop to make sure that these are all up to par and that there's no problem doing that. And then I've got something a little bit kind of crazy planned to do an actual stabbing penetration test. But just to start with, again, we'll start. Now again, remember, these things are sharp. They're sharpened up as field knives will be. They're not razor sharp. So they're not gonna cut smooth as butter through all this stuff. But starting with this, not bad. Left a little tiny bit. We'll do one more just to make sure we're getting a fair run on each one. Okay. Nice. All right, let's move on to the 275. Okay, that was a whole lot easier. A whole lot easier than the actual survival knife. And now let's go to Mr. 810. I know a lot of people like to use serrations to cut rope. I don't. I actually find that a nice, sharp, straight blade cuts rope a lot better than serrations ever do. So, but I am actually having some trouble doing it here with the Contego, so let's go with the serrations and see. All right, with the serrations, it cuts very cleanly, very quickly. Now, what I want to do is just lay the P-cord along this wood and give it a chop and see how that works out. Remember, these wood strips here, they're only being supported by this grass under us, just like if we were reeling in the field. So there's no good, hard, firm support, so this thing will either cut through or it won't. Yeah. Not a bad test. Let's try again. Not too bad. About the same, just slightly less powerful. And remember, with this, you get an extra 2.5 ounces or so over the 275, and a little bit more leverage with the shape of the blade and the size of the handle. And about the same. Finally, 810. Now, before I even get to it, the 810 being longer than the 275, I'm wondering if that extra leverage with a little bit more weight up at the front of the blade will help out or not. No, actually, a little less effective than the 275. Let's try one more. That was actually the best cut we had so far with any of these 3 knives, just chopping a piece of P-cord. So, moving on to the next one, we're going to do a little penetration test. So what we've got here that we're going to play with is the crotch area protector from a standard issue military interceptor vest. These are the same vests that we, up until very recently, wore overseas. The only difference being that this one is woodland camouflage, so it's been phased out of service, which is why it's hanging out in my garage doing nothing. And it is ballistic nylon, and then on the inside over here, we've got Kevlar, which we'll see in a minute. These loop into the vest itself and help it hang down in the crotch area to give you some kind of bulletproof protection. Now this, I'll state outright, will not prevent rifle rounds from penetrating. This is really for lower velocity handgun rounds and such, and shell fragments. Body armor, interceptor groin protection, okay? So this is all actual Kevlar in here. So what I want to do is put it back in this nylon shell, and we're going to stab through it. We're going to see how the knives do stabbing through what your typical bulletproof vest is made of. So I'm going to start with the good old Army Air Force survival knife right up here. Wow, that's actually pretty good stopping power right there. Let's give it another go. Not bad. The Kevlar did actually stop it. You can see the hits there, but nothing penetrated through the other side. So now let's switch over to the 275. And you can see the cuts there. Now the 275, actually, if you look at the cuts here from the field knife and over here, the 275 did a little bit more damage, just superficially, but nothing again penetrated. I can tell you right now, the shape of this handle and the way it's held, this was the least comfortable knife to actually do the stabbing with. There actually wasn't a whole lot of discomfort holding the 275 or the field knife here, but all the little cuts and the 90-degree ridges over there, that actually kind of hurt right in the palm of my hand as I was stabbing, so that's something to be of note. And again, nothing penetrated through to the other side. And the Contego, I think you can see the cuts here are slightly bigger in terms of penetration. Might have gone through one more layer of the Kevlar than the 275 did, but still, nothing went all the way through to the other side. And we've learned that even though these are all extremely rugged, hard-use knives, they're still not going to give you any kind of armor-piercing, whatever, capability. Obviously, none of these are tanto blades, which are designed specifically to punch through armor and stuff like that. The Contego is a reverse tanto, but still, it doesn't have the same forward stabbing strength as a traditional tanto blade would have. But since we have this wood right here, I'd like to just do a little chopping first, just with the knife itself, and then I'll use this one to hammer the knife through. We'll see how that works out. It's not bad. Okay, 275 with the same amount of force, same amount of wax. Took a lot more wood out of that corner than the actual traditional survival knife. Not bad, actually. It sort of matches up, I'd say, maybe a little bit deeper, in fact, than the 275 one. So it looks like the winner on this one happens to be the Contego, just in terms of, again, the leverage when you're chopping with this longer handle, longer blade, even though the 275 gives you a heavier blade. The depth we get to at 5 hits with the 275. Looks like the Contego is allowing us to go a little bit deeper. I don't know, again, it could be the difference in the blade. It's a thinner blade, which means it's going to cut a little easier through some things. And of course, as expected, that has the lowest amount of penetration there. So it being Idaho in the summer, I'm not going to find a whole lot of nice fresh tree branches lying around unless I actually find a tree and hack it up, which I don't have. My yard is devoid of trees, and it's not like I'm very close to a national park or anything to go to. So what I did was I drove around until I found some nice trimmings. These are decent sized branches. I'm going to use this one kind of as a club. I had seen a video once with a Griptilian where somebody did a test like this, and the axis lock midway through had failed and ended up with a knife kind of like that. I know that one of the things they recommend with an axis lock is if you're going to hammer wood, you put the knife blade up against the wood, drop the axis lock, and hit that way. I'm going to start like this though, just see what happens. I'm going to be very safety conscious, of course, but if you're going to do something like this, it might be advisable to start with the axis lock already opened so that there's no tension right there at the joint, that it's just nice and easy and flows. But I'm doing it on purpose because I want to test what happens to those axis locks. Alright, so we're starting with our good old Army Air Force survival knife. Just want to hack our way through this, or at least most of the way through, see how it holds up. I don't think I need to say this, but you should never really, unless you absolutely have to, start wailing away on your metal knife blade with a metal object. You always want to use some kind of firm wood or something like that. So this is actually pretty firm wood right here, so this is good for the test. Now you can see I'm not making much headway at all using the old Air Force survival knife. And again, it might be because I'm hammering into soft earth, but you know, let's try to make this as realistic where we don't have nice, you know, tools and stuff to help us out, good work surfaces. We're out in the brush setting up camp or something. So start with our 275. And this actually is starting to chip away pretty nice. Let's keep going. All right, we got a lot further with the 275 than we did with the Air Force survival knife. I'm gonna finish the cut I was doing with the Air Force survival knife just for the sake of finishing it, so we see exactly how much force it takes. I'm actually destroying the wood that I'm pounding with before I'm cutting through this. So, you know, I'm gonna say the Air Force survival knife has just flat out failed us in this one. Now, this is where I think the lighter weight of the Contego is actually gonna work against it compared to the 275. Not bad, about halfway through. And I need to say again that the handle design on this Contego is killing me. The 275 is a much more comfortable knife to hold, especially if you have to do these really hard use tasks. The cut on here, not very hand friendly at all. The winner in this test is most definitely the 275. It is far and above when it comes to like chopping. You know, let's say we need to cut down some tree limbs. And I want to say also, this is very dry hardwood. I think it would be a lot easier if we were using some green, you know, fresh on the tree wood for the cutting that's wet inside and everything. But 275, definitely the winner in this case. Since we've gone through another round of tests, nice and smooth with both knives, no problems whatsoever. Still opens up very well. Hangs nice and loose. So they're holding up actually fantastic so far. So what we're gonna do now, each one of these knives, blades, is spending the night in the ground here. It's about 5:25 p.m., give or take. I'm gonna be up bright and early. I'm gonna come get these guys, but they're gonna spend the evening stuck in the ground in moist, soft dirt. So we'll see what that does with it. In the morning, come get these things, take a look, and we'll see if there's any corrosion or how they're holding up then.